Okay, hello everybody. So we're going to look at part of chapter three of the book, and this is on Tesla's Vortex and the 369 code. So the chapter kind of starts off with telling you a little bit about Nikola Tesla, how he was this incredible inventor, a genius who was trained in electrical engineering. I was really captivated by Tesla's work, and he wasn't just an abstract thinker. He was an application specialist, and he helped create today's electric motor, also alternating current. This was very big as well, wireless power transmission, and he worked on early X-ray technologies. And there's some discussion about that he might have experimented with particle beam devices as well. So he did so much here, and he had a lot of patents and just incredible work. As I mentioned before, his work was focused largely on resonance, not force, not Newtonian force, but resonance. Um, and this I mentioned is similar to if I was singing and I had a crystal glass that was in front of me, and I was able to, with my sound frequency, match the vibrational frequencies of the molecules in the glass, and they would become entangled and in resonance with one another. And then you could have communication, energy amplification. And then if the energy built up, then it could shatter the glass. So I'm not really using a force like a hammer. So this is kind of how the chapter starts off, a little bit about telling a little bit about Nikola Tesla, and how he was just really fascinated by resonance, standing waves, oscillations, and he integrated much of that into his work. Um, so really these findings were really quite revolutionary. Um, he wanted to bring wireless transmission of energy to the planet. And of course, he ran into a lot of resistance in this area. A lot of the monopolies, the infrastructure for charging for energy weren't quite ready for that. And so he didn't make a lot of advances in this area, and his funding, it got very difficult for him to get external funding. Um, so he ended his career up in the New Yorker Hotel, where he carried out a lot of experiments there in New York. And he died in 1943 in January 7th. And this is where a lot of his notebooks, a lot of his diagrams, formulas just went missing. And some of them returned, and then some of the boxes didn't. So it's not clear where these ended up, who got them, where they were taken by other governments, three-letter alphabet agencies, because he was working on a lot of products that were very powerful. He was using scalar physics. Tesla believed not in the mechanical universe, but one that was actually like breathing and that was actually alive. And this breath is what I will describe as kind of an outgoing expansion of the magnetic waves. And then you would have return waves that would be dielectric, and then a pause. Um, so this is largely aligns with some of the Egyptian work that was done by Thoth in ancient Egypt, Both of these, Thoth was the god of the arts and the sciences and liberal arts, and Thoth, along with Sishat, his Seshat is his consort. They brought forth a lot of this information and knowledge, um, and so both were quite visionary, I think, and attuned to um, how energy flowed, the importance of energy flow. And that's kind of what I want to discuss as we go a little bit further here. In what did Tesla mean by if you solved or understood the mysteries behind the numbers 369, you would have the keys to the universe. Um, and that's what I really want to get at. As I go further, I will show you that the number three, which many people would say is related to the triangle, which it certainly is. But also, you'll see it has to do with the dielectric. Six, the magnetic, and nine will be the pause. I will show you how these numbers show up on the etheric lattice. And Tesla was a very strong supporter of the etheric lattice, this invisible um, geometric structure that is what the universe breathes out. It's like a constraint framework, a medium, if you will, for the transmission of electromagnetic waves, which we'll talk a little bit about. But he definitely was a proponent of the ether. The ether was kind of gotten rid of by traditional physics. There was one experiment done by Michelson and Morley where they tested whether there was a static ether, and they disproved a static ether. But this is not the same ether that Tesla was talking about. He was talking about a breathing, living ether. And I think that this is also was demonstrated by Lori Gardner, who is also known as Fractal Woman. And she kind of went through this and how that original experiment didn't disprove the living the living ether, which is quite profound. So as we move through this, I do want to show you that our physical and highlight that our physical reality that we have for forming our perceptions is only about 2% of absolute reality. So if you look at the human body and you look at the sensory perceptions, we are bound by very narrow ranges in vision and hearing, for example. And since our perceptions form our reality, and we are only capturing about 2% of absolute reality, we're missing quite a bit of what's going on around us. So this is also limits our ability to make conclusions about certain things. So it's interesting because the ether is, to me, seems like it's creeping back in different ways. Quantum mechanics is very, very difficult for most people to understand yet explain, and also which is we're seeing like dark forces now are reappearing, dark matter, for example, and these to me represent ways to reintroduce this ether. And Einstein even had coined the fabric of space-time, which is to me the ether. And it makes it difficult, again, from my perspective, to explain magnetism without the presence of the ether. So I do kind of, I don't want to cover everything that was in the chapter. I kind of want to try to get into a little bit about connecting Tesla's vortex mathematics to the Black Widow spider hourglass. So I want to introduce a little bit. I was kind of drawn to Tesla's vortex mathematics and trying to understand how these numbers flow and how the energy flows. So what I want to kind of do is share my screen and try to pull this up here so that I can show you. Let me pull this up and so I can show you this. So I'll pull up my PowerPoint slides. Okay. So I think I'll just keep the slides as I have them here and continue to kind of talk as I go through this. Let me shut those down. Okay. So here I want to describe what you see as vortex mathematics. So vortex mathematics is where you take a number and you double it. So you can see I'm taking one and I'm doubling one to go to two. I can double two and go to four, double four to go to eight, and then double eight to get a 16. And now I'm going to introduce something called digital rooting. Digital rooting is where you can take two numbers, for example, and you reduce them down to a single digit. So 1 and 6 would represent 7. And in this, it's believed, if you look in the Vedic traditions or you look at, you go back and you look at gematria, that there is a precedent for this as being a science as you go back, or a language. And so you can see here from, if we double 16, we go to 32. This is a digital root 5. We double 64, which is, we double 32, we get 64, which is a 10 or a 1. And you can see as I go through these numbers, double 64 to 128, this adds to an 11, or that's a 2. You're going to see the same repeating pattern as I double these numbers. So it's going to go 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. Now, notably, you notice that the numbers 3, 6, 9 are missing in the doubling of these numbers. But also then if I have the numbers, I take 1 and divide it by 2, I get 0.5. And if you get rid of or neglect the decimal point, you'll see that this would be 5. If you take 0.5 divided by 2, it's 0.225, which is a 7. If you digital root it, the 2 and the 5, you get 7. If you take 0.25 divided by 2, you get 0.125, which is 8. You know, this is 7 and 1 and being 8. 0.125 divided by 2 is 0.0625, which this is a 13, or 1 and a 3 is a 4. And then 0.0625 divided by 2, you can see what you get. So you can look at this and run the math. Most people can to run the math on this, but you can see that this is the 578421 is this pattern in reverse. Again, this is halving the numbers, and you can see these are running in the complete opposite direction as over here. Again, no 3, 6, or 9. So this is describing the forward flow of energy. This would be the reverse flow of energy. And it's actually many things, but I decided to, model these back onto the Black Widow hourglass. And so so this is the hourglass. It's two triangles. One is inverted, the other one's regular, normal, presentation as you would see it. They're two like equilateral triangles. And I put the 1, 2, 4 on the top triangle. And then I put the 8, 7, 5 on the bottom triangle. And when I did this, a lot of people that I saw with YouTube videos, nobody could really describe what was going on. Where was the 3, 6, and the 9? And so I decided to model them back onto the hourglass and put the 3 on the left. At the constriction point, I put 0 and 9, and I put 6 to the right. I've already mentioned, and then I connected these with dash lines, that these two were vertical. This one was horizontal. Right down the center of the spine was this, I put another dash line down the middle of the triangle. And you could see then that down the center there was this, I put the 2 and the 7. And so the interesting thing here is if you add 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, that you get the number 27. There's also, if you just look at the 1, 2, 4 and the 8, 7, 5, there's 6 digits that are here. This 6 digits represents what's known as the crystal spiral, describes energy in motion or a vortex, an orbital step of 6, which I'll describe in a little bit, but you can kind of describe it maybe like a merry-go-round that you'd see at the playground, where you would have 6 seats, or there'd be 6 stations, and 1, 2, 4, 3, or 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, and 5, and they're at different positions along the way. And three and six they're not on the merry-go-round, but they help kind of push it or pull it around. Um, and so this was my first step forward. And as I looked at this, I started to do other things with this hourglass. But my main point in this video is to really show you how that if you take and you double numbers or you half numbers, you get a repeating pattern that's 6 digits, and you don't have the numbers 3, 6, or 9 appearing. And how the 6-digit number will run in this loop. All right. And so think about this as energy flow. You can also think of this as music or harmonics, because you can have, this is an octave. When you double like the frequency, you are seeing from 1 to 2 or 2 to 4, or these are known as octaves, and also halving as well. So this connects, this hourglass with the numerology placed on it connects to harmonics. I also will show you a little bit later that these numbers on here also connect to geometry, proportions, and rotations, which is in this whole little structure here, amazingly, is the etheric lattice. And I will show you the etheric, how this is another way to represent the etheric lattice. And nature has stamped it on the abdomen of a black widow spider. All right, so I'm going to go to the next slide and just show you our next slide here, because I want to make a point here, is that if you, this constriction point here, which is almost like you could consider it like a stillness, if you pull this point up towards you, and then you collapse these down, you'll see what is kind of an image that looks like the Great Pyramid in Giza. So this is an aerial view shot from the very top. And the interesting thing is that most people don't realize it's really 8-sided. The triangles have creases down the center to dissipate the energy, because it's static, and you would have the buildup of negative energy in this structure. And so this concavity here actually eliminates that negative energy. I mean, you can see that over here. You can see as I have the lines down through the spine of these triangles and across here. If you were to pull this up, you will match the Great Pyramid in Egypt. So I was looking for these connections because the ancients had great knowledge in energy flow. Other things that I did with the looking at the flow of energy around the actual structure, I did a number of different things, but I will show you a few things because I haven't mentioned this 3, 9, 6 on the bottom. But let's first just take the 1 and the 8. The 1 and the 8 is 9. If you take the 2 and the 7, it's 9. If you take the 4 and the 5, it's 9. So with just using those numbers, you would get a 999. With the 3, the 0, or the 9, and the 6 here, if you add these up, the 1, 3, 8, you will get 12. If you digital root 12, the 1 and the 2 make a 3. For 2, 9, 7 down the center of the spine, that is 18. So it's 2 and 9 is 11 and 7, or that's a digital root 9. And then the 4, 6, and the 5 add to 15, or digital root 6. So I began to kind of look at these numbers that were on this hourglass. And one of the things, there's some really interesting things here. Jason Bashir talks about the Phoenix cycle being 138 years. These are like a timetable for catastrophic events every 138 years. He's a chronologist that looks throughout time at events that happen on the planet. And that's very fascinating in itself. But I also could take like the 138 and I could subtract it by mere subtraction. And you can get numbers. And I'll talk about another video about mere subtraction and the significance of that. But you would get like 693. And 693, if you add that, is you can see is 69, and the 3 is 8, or digital root 9. If you take this 693 minus the 396, it's mere, you get 297. I'm going to talk a lot about 297. That's a very important number that runs right down the center of the spine of the hourglass. Um, and you can see the 2, 9, and the 7. This is also an 18, or digital root 9. 465 minus its reflection, 564, gives 99. That's also an 18, or digital root 9. And then if you took 297 minus its mere 792, you get 495. That's also 18, digital root 9. So this is very interesting to me. And 792, the mirror of 297, a lot when we look at scalar physics, and I'm going to go on to talk about how to test specific numbers by mere subtraction to figure out whether the geometry is self-sustaining and stable. We can do mere subtraction. I can talk about how it relates to physics with destructive interference or constructive interference if we add the mirror images or the reflections together. This helped me unlock a lot of this grid. So I will talk a lot more about that, but I just want to mention a couple of things that I have in the book. This 792, where do we see that number? 792, the height of the Sphinx is 66 feet. If you convert that into inches, it's 792 inches. That is very interesting as far as energy goes. Also, if you look at the diameter of the Earth, if you go across, it's 7,920 miles across. I understand that the Earth does expand, but this is the original. If you go back to when they were building the pyramids, the diameter was 7,920. So I will continue to talk about this number of 792 as well, because it has profound examples of where we see it in many of the dimensions of major architectural features that were left on the planet. Okay, so this was really quite profound to me. It was my first step where I was looking at the vortex mathematics, the doubling and the halving of the numbers. And so really just focusing in and understanding digital roots was my first step forward. So just go back here so you can kind of see this. This was my very first step forward. And then the big jump was me modeling the 3 and the 6. But I do want to explain a little bit more about the hourglass. So I want to talk about, we see this point here of constriction. So when the waves are coming out and they're returning, you could almost consider that they're bidirectional waves, and the outgoing magnetic wave represents expansion. Expansion, you could say it's a centrifugal force, it's outgoing, and then it will return, which is a centripetal. That's the dielectric, or that corresponds to the number 3. It's the masculine, it's the compression, and you could say it's, like I said, centrifugal. So all these terms really mean the same thing. And again, the expansion is the feminine. So you have the masculine and the feminine, and you're looking for like this perfect stillness or balance between the two waves. And so let me jump to another diagram here, which I just wanted to point this out, just kind of as a teaser, is that when I started to look at the nine times table, which we all kind of are forced to do when we're in growing up in school. One times nine, two times nine, three times nine, four times nine, five times nine, six times nine. If you notice here, it's like 0, 9, 1, 8, it's 18, 27. And then there's a reversal from 45, it goes 54, and then 63 instead of, 60, this 36. You see how these are mirrors of one another? And 27 is the mirror of 72, and 81 is the mirror of 18. So you could see I saw these like the 18, the 27, the 45, the 36 was here, and then the 54 just going the opposite, look direction here, 81 versus 18. And this also was pointing to something very, very significant that I'm going to talk about a little bit later in the book as we go further. So this is kind of the overview that I wanted to give, and I will bring more as we go. But this was the connection to the vortex mathematics and mapping it back to the red hourglass, and you can kind of play around with this because I did for quite some time, like taking and going around here, like 124, and I would add it to 4, 6, 5, and then add it to 5, 7, 8, and then 8, 3, 1, and you'll just see you're just going to get like 999 across, or you doesn't matter which way you go when you're describing this flow of energy in this circuit. Okay, that's it for now, and I will bring more, add more to this chapter later.